You did all of that. Imagine you did all of that. You put in all of this effort, this huge show for these? For this? Welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel, and I read Bible so that you don't have to. And guess what, guys? This is going to be the last episode re-Exodus. This is the Exodus recap where I go over the whole entire book. A lot has happened, so I don't think it's a bad idea to talk about it. When I did the recap in Genesis, I sort of asked the question, is anything here worth keeping? Is anything being told to us that we might need to know for our lives? And I'm going to take a similar theme. In 2 Timothy 3:16-17, it says, "All scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and training in righteousness, that a man may be complete, equipped for every good work." That's a bit of an annoying translation, but all scripture is God-breathed and good for teaching and rebuking and all the other things. We're going to see if this scripture, which is the book of Exodus, does any of those things. What is it teaching us? What are we supposed to learn from this? Because I have a feeling that there's nothing to be learned except for be very afraid of God or something along those lines. There are moments in the Bible where Christians are going to tell you there's a poignant lesson to be learned here. There's a message. There's something that's being acted out so that it becomes a story so that we can read it and learn from it. There are Christians that believe that that's how this is happening, that God put all of this into action so that me in 2024 can read it and go, oh, now I know God more. It's all this act of theater. There are people that believe that. I'm not making that up, okay? At the same time, these exact same people are going to say that certain stories are just a dispassionate telling of events. There's nothing to learn here, nothing to see here. It's just what happened. And I don't know which one is which. It's almost impossible to tell. Is every single thing in Scripture a lesson? Is every single thing profitable for teaching? Paul seems to think so, or whoever wrote 2 Timothy. We are going to look at these stories, some of the main stories, and see if they are profitable for those things. Before we get started, if you guys wouldn't mind to subscribe if you haven't, you really should have subscribed by now. Like the video and drop me a comment if you want to be so kind. And we will jump right in here with the beginning of Exodus. All of a sudden, the Pharaoh forgets that Joseph ever existed, probably because this is hundreds of years later. And he decides that he's going to put all of the Hebrews into slavery. What gets really, really bad is that he decides that he's going to kill all the brand new baby boys that are being born, and all the brand new baby boys that are being born, all the brand new baby boys that are being born. Yeah, that's right. I'm good at tongue twisters. And that's horrific, by the way. He's doing a horrible thing to a group of people who are already slaves, which is bad, by the way. Slavery is bad, believe it or not. To add insult to injury, he's killing a bunch of brand new baby boys. And then we get this story of these lying midwives. And I asked the question then, and I'll ask it now, what are we supposed to learn? Lying is sometimes good and sometimes rewarded. That lying isn't just something people should be killed for across the board. That there are sometimes very good reasons to lie. That morality is subjective. It really does make you ask that question. If we do want objective morality, then lying should either be always wrong or not wrong. I guess it could be sometimes wrong, like depending on circumstances, but then somebody has to evaluate that. And if it's God evaluating that, then we won't know what objective morality is. We don't have access to the objective morality. So it's kind of a moot point. We're guessing. We're guessing that there's an objective morality. It's completely useless. But this move that Pharaoh does of killing all the brand new baby boys, which is awful, prompts God to slowly torture slowly torture all the Egyptians and to drag this out as long as possible until he can finally repay evil with evil and do the exact same thing to Pharaoh to get him back, you son of a gun. And then, after he's finally gotten him back, he gets him back even more by killing Pharaoh and all of his army men. This misstep, which I'm going to say is a heinous crime, like I don't want to downplay, because what it ends up seeming like is that like I'm pro everyone but Yahweh, and I don't want to really seem like that. It's only that Yahweh claims to be so good, right? He claims to be something so amazing. So you go, well, I'm going to judge that character more harshly because of the claims. This character of the Pharaoh, he's supposed to be the bad guy. Inexcusable behavior, absolutely. But what God does in return is absolutely barbaric. He has all the power in the world to positively dispose Pharaoh to not killing a bunch of babies. Like, he could have changed that. He could have softened that guy's heart on day one. This whole thing is a horrible play. Every time I go there, I feel like, well, that's just like baseline, end of conversation, and it's not that fun. That's why it's more fun to do internal critiques and just like sort of play around with the narrative. Because as soon as you call God the ultimate being who can do whatever he wants, then everything that's going on is just completely insane and horrible. But it also kind of ends the conversation, because it's like, well, none of it needed to happen. Unless somebody was like really, really creative and was like, no, all of this needed to happen because of all these pieces. But nobody has that view. Like, nobody could possibly be able to do that math. So it's always a stupid thing for them to say. But I think it's pretty safe to say that when God does a long, drawn out torture event, which is bad for the Hebrews, bad for the Egyptians, and tons of Egyptians die because of one man's choice, he's not good. That's not the best way that could have gone. Moses commits a murder, and I don't know if he's ever going to be punished for it. He isn't by the end of Exodus, that's for sure. Commits a murder, which is one of the 10 Commandments, but he acts as though it's one of the laws in chapter 21 that says, if you accidentally kill this guy, he goes, if I allow that to happen, then just run away. And that's what Moses does. He runs away. And he runs away because some fellow Hebrews are like, hey, you're the guy that did that murder over there. And Moses is like, oh no, they're going to rat me out. Are they bad guys in that? I don't think they're seen as bad or good. They're just kind of like guys that happen to be around when this happens. They saw him kill an Egyptian because he got angry. Of course, the Egyptian was beating one of their people, so yeah, of course. And then Moses gets mad again at these guys, and he's like beating up one of the Hebrews because he's a violent maniac. And they're like, oh my goodness, you're gonna kill that guy too? We saw what you did with the Egyptian. Like, I get it. I kind of get their perspective. They're worried about this menace, this violent menace. Anyway, so Moses runs away and eventually ends up at a burning bush. And I always imagine this story kind of like a somber, beautiful event. There's a burning bush there, but the bush isn't burning. It's just on fire. The bush tells him to remove his sandals. And it's very like, it's where you are standing is holy ground. It's very ceremonious. Then they have this conversation, and the conversation might as well be written by Mel Brooks. You know what I mean? It's just so silly. It's like, I don't even talk that well. I've got faltering lips. I can't do it. He's like, hey, I made the lips falter. You don't think I can change the lips from faltering? I have made everyone blind, deaf, lame. I'm horrible. I do all the awful things, but I can fix it. Don't you think I can fix it? I'm in charge of this, And he's like, hey, I don't really want to do it. You're gonna do it. I don't wanna, I just don't feel like I'm the right guy for the job. And then God's like, fine, I'll just go and get your brother Aaron. I'll do it with him. He's on his way anyway. What, you already had the plan to bring my brother Aaron? Why'd you even harass me with all this? I had to go through these motions here just to make it seem like this was a story. Okay, well, I hope a brother Aaron does a lot of the stuff. He's probably not. I don't know if I'm Italian at this point. It is a very funny dialogue that happens between a man and a bush that's on fire. It is very, very silly indeed. So then Moses is heading to Egypt finally, and there's this bizarre emergency circumcision, which is a story that none of us will ever let go of. It is such a ridiculous tale. It is so funny. It's like, why? What are we supposed to learn from this? What could the lesson possibly be? What could the lesson be? God is going to come at you to kill you? Whoop, let's wipe some foreskin blood on your feet, Moses. And all of a sudden, you're some sort of bridegroom of God or whatever is written there. What is this? And one of my commenters, a little bit of a shout out to Al Schneider, he wrote the verse in one of the comments on another video and was like, God changed his mind. Why didn't I realize that at the time? I was so blown away by Moses being saved by a foreskin. I was totally missed the thing where God's like, all right, I won't do it. You changed my mind. There was no real promise there. It was just like, God was going to do something. Imagine that this is an anthropomorphizing of God again. Then we have to say that God pretended like he was going to kill Moses so that his wife would freak out, do an emergency circumcision with a flint knife, just so he could relent and not kill him, so that people knew how important it was that babies are circumcised. Like, what? What is the circumcise your kids? Is that the lesson, guys? Like, why are we following this religion? Why do people follow this religion? It's so wild to me. So then we have the hardening of the heart. So we have the 10 plagues, I believe, and throughout them, God is hardening Pharaoh's heart, or Pharaoh's heart is being hardened naturally, or Pharaoh is choosing to harden his heart. It is a bone of contention, obviously. If you believe that you have free will, this seems like an obvious infringement of free will, but Christians have apologetics to try to excuse this. And ironically, they use, I believe, stuff attributed to Paul about being handed over to a reprobate mind. But Paul also, in Romans 9, does say that, well, God's going to harden who he's going to harden. So he actually uses it as a lesson to teach you about determinism, that God, or predeterminism, that God is in sovereign control over all of this hardening, and he's going to do what he's going to do. So don't ask questions. That's what Paul is saying. So the fact that you can't let God claim that he's hardening Pharaoh's heart and Paul confirm it, instead you have to find something that doesn't even apply to this, which is being handed over to a reprobate mind, and you want to excuse God's behavior. But that doesn't make sense. If God was consistent, like if God was truly consistent, he never messed with free will. He cared about free will. He was always in the right, doing the right thing. And his behavior was above reproach. We would see that. We would see it. We wouldn't have these conversations. It wouldn't be confusing. We would have nothing to get over. It would be straight ahead and just make sense. That isn't the case, guys. That's not what's happening here. No one's being nitpicky. People are just reading the text and noticing things. That's all that's happening. So if you're like, they don't want it to be true, it doesn't matter. If the book worked, if it made sense, it would make sense. You wouldn't have to fight with it. You wouldn't have to wrestle with it. You'd be like, oh, yeah, of course. That would be what a perfect God would do. He wouldn't harden someone's heart so that it takes longer so there can be more plagues so that his people can be beaten up and tortured and treated poorly so that they start cursing God out, so that God can eventually kill a bunch of firstborns and then harden the Pharaoh's heart again so he can kill Pharaoh and all his best soldiers. We wouldn't see that if this God was truly a good God, a just God, or any of those adjectives. We would not see a verse that says God killed the firstborns of all the slave girls. That just would not be in the Bible if it was a book about a good God. And then we get the story of the Passover, which I think a lot of the times Christians, Jews as well, see this as kind of a beautiful story. God passed over them. I mean, the Jews still celebrate the Passover, right? The Hebrews painted blood on their doors and God passed over. He didn't let the destroyer go in and kill the firstborns of their families. There are obviously a couple of problems. One of them being that God is killing all the Egyptians and he doesn't know the difference between the Egyptians and his chosen people. He just doesn't know where his chosen people live. And the other part is these people need to shed blood to save themselves from their God. This would be a great story if there was another villain coming and God was like, I'll protect you from that villain as long as you paint the blood. That's still weird, but the villain can't get through. Here's a magic spell so the villain can't get through, something like that. But this is God requiring something so that he will save you from himself. And that is also consistent. That's what Jesus did. He died to save you from himself. Like that is always the theme. It's almost like they do have the bad guy character, but they don't want to give him too much power. So they're going to give Yahweh still all the power, and he's the good guy and the villain in one story, right? It's not that great. It's like, oh, wow, this is such a beautiful moment where God didn't kill the people that he likes the best because they did the thing he told them to do. It's so weird. Right? It is really weird if you zoom out just a little bit. So then we get the story of the Red Sea. And what happens in Exodus 14 is that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. He hardens Pharaoh's heart, so what will happen? So that Pharaoh will head towards the Red Sea to get the Hebrews. And they, of course, run down on dry land, and Pharaoh follows them because God has hardened his heart to do that. He's compelling them into the Red Sea. He is motivating that move. God is doing this. This reminds me of when Jesus sent the demons into the pigs, and the demons motivated the pigs to run into the sea and drown. This is very similar to that, except God is the demons. God is the one that's hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he's compelled to go and drown. God is the demons. You can draw these parallels. Why are we not drawing the right parallels, guys? God is the demons. He's Legion, and he's caused these people to run into the Red Sea and die. They didn't have to do that. He could have not hardened Pharaoh's heart, left him in Egypt. Everything would have been fine. But he possessed Pharaoh with a hard heart, and Pharaoh was compelled to go after the Hebrews, which God had directed to be at the Red Sea so he could split it apart and drown all the Egyptians, which is actually really, really cool. It's got a lot of drama. It's a cool moment for a fiction. But the writers of the story probably didn't know that there would be people for thousands of years after who are reading these stories, taking them seriously, and thinking this is a tri-omni God, right? They didn't realize, oh, wait a second, that's impossible, that no one would ever think that. They're just like, oh yeah, this is cool. I actually don't know what they were thinking, but it seems like they were thinking, oh yeah, this is cool. We have people in churches preaching on this like it's the best thing that ever happened. You know what I mean? That this is something good that a God did, you know? He didn't just possess a bunch of people to drown for really no good reason. You already got them back. You already did your tit for tat. You wrathful revenge war God. You know, how much more? No, I got to get rid of all of them. Okay. So then we get the miracle of the manna. And that's a really cool story. What's the lesson? What's the lesson of God throwing manna down from heaven? It must be that God will intervene. He will intervene whenever he cares to, whenever it's his whim. Anytime we say will, we should start saying whim. Whenever it's God's whim, he will do it. He will intervene. And that's a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson in a world where 3 million people die every year of starvation. It is a difficult lesson that God will intervene when it's his whim to do so. And he feeds these people for 40 years, even after the complaints of them being stubborn. He's like, you guys are stubborn, but I'll still take care of you. However, you know, in chapter 21, I'm going to have all sorts of slavery laws and how to keep women as slaves for life and how to trick men into becoming slaves for life. But the reason why you need to have these slaves, and the reason why it's important in this culture is because if it were not so, these people might starve to death. What? Is that why? Yeah, the economy depends on it. But God, you can just feed people. You can just send down manna from heaven. If there is a legitimate concern over the well-being of these people and the filling of their stomachs, you have a tool in your tool belt for that. It's called manna from heaven. And you do this for 2 million people for 40 years. Why do they need to enslave each other? In what world? You know, I think there's a bit of a lapse when you talk with a non-believer and a Christian, and there's like this flip-flopping between the internal critique and the external critique. Internal critique, external critique. And Christians do it too, but the way they do it is they flip outside of the narrative, which is people are at the base of Mount Sinai with manna, waiting for the rules of their new government. And they go, oh no, in that time, in the surrounding cultures, what we actually know of this, slavery was ubiquitous and it was necessary for economies. They couldn't have done it any other way. They go outside of what people know of the ancient Near East. Stay in the narrative. Stay in the text. In your text, God is giving everyone food, free food every day. They're hanging out at the base of a mountain. There's no reason for them to need to brace for this kind of chaos where slavery might be necessary and subjugating women might be necessary. He can create all the parameters for a beautiful, equal society, but he doesn't because I agree with you. They're not at the base of Mount Sinai. They're in their tribes, and they're writing laws that these people are going to live by. And maybe these slavery laws aren't so bad for that time. Maybe. In the grand scheme of things, they're not so good either. And ultimately, if this is written by a God, that God is a failure. I wish I could end the episode there because I feel like I did a bit of a mic drop. But I have a couple more points. The next one being the battle with the Amalekites, where Moses holds up his hands and that lets Joshua defeat the Amalekites. You know, what? Really? That's how that works? Okay. What are we supposed to learn? I think we're supposed to learn that God rewards arbitrary behavior. Even when he doesn't ask you to do a particular thing, if you guess at it, which is going up a mountain, holding up your hands, he will honor that by letting you win a battle. It's a very stupid story. Just do something arbitrary for God and it might just work. That's kind of the lesson there. I don't know, honestly, if maybe there's cultural significance. It's like, well, in those days, every time I say something stupid, some Bible scholar will be like, well, in those days, holding up hands was something that, whatever. There may have been something to that, but it just seems incredibly silly. And then we get the recounting of the Mount Sinai / Horeb show, the smoke and the trumpets and the lightning and the fire and fanfare. God, Moses going up. I'm going to go talk to God. And he walks up there and it's all really theatrical and really exciting. And this is going to show everyone that Moses is the main guy and we should all trust Moses implicitly. And this is so important because God's got some laws about slavery and how to subjugate women. That's why we need to do all this. It's worthwhile. It's valuable. Really. The 10 Commandments are not great. There are a few that are fine, but I don't know if they're worth that kind of fanfare. And then we get into chapter 21, which is just all going to be slavery. And okay, there's some dumb stuff about goring bulls. If you read these laws, first of all, a lot of them obviously don't apply today. You wouldn't even worry about them. There's just not enough bulls going around. And then you get all sorts of horrible stuff that you do not want. You would not want them. The laws go from useless to scary, and then there's 3 that are let's not murder or steal. You did all of that. Imagine you did all of that. You put in all of this effort, this huge show for these, for this, and then you rewrote them differently than the first time because you can't be consistent if your life depends on it in this book. This is your best stuff? Come on, please tell me that's not true. Tell me there's something better than how to subjugate women. This is how we're going to keep women as slaves. We're going to call them wives. You're going to buy them from their dad. You're going to be able to buy them for your son. You can't sell them to foreigners, but if you mistreat them, they'll leave without any problem. It's what are you talking about? And then a whole bunch of crap about making a golden calf-esque tabernacle. I just don't know how this one really caught on. You know what I mean? It must be compelling writing to a degree because it really caught on, eh? It is everywhere. It is pervasive. It's not deserving. It really doesn't seem. It's because of Jesus. It's definitely because of Jesus. That character, that's the one that really grabs people. That's the one that spread like wildfire. I think all the violence and the proselytizing, I think that helped. The Great Commission was probably part of it. Anyway, I digress. Listen, guys, thanks for being here. It's been fun to go through Exodus. There was a lot of really boring stuff at the end there. Probably some episodes you guys did not see because I posted 4 in a week. There was a lot of really fun stories now that I kind of wrote it out as the main ones. We will see you next time. The next Bible episode we'll be doing will be Leviticus, and I can wait. I could wait. I'm in no rush. No, I look forward to it and I will see you there. Guys, if you haven't subscribed, please do that. Like this video and comment on it. In the meantime, have a beautiful rest of your day or night and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.